gonna hit record. Session is being recorded. So hi everybody. Welcome to day 2 of training for new online instructors. Just wanted to share a little bit about the day ahead. So here's our agenda. You can all see this, right? You
Yes.
can see this, right? Thank you. Okay, so as you can see, just welcoming you again, I'm Tammy Couples, Executive Director of Online Learning. Um, and then at 10:05, Jeffrey Ryman will join us from the CET. Most of you, I think, know Jeffrey. He works with online pedagogy, face-to-face pedagogy across all the modalities, really. So he's going to talk to you a bit about engaging your students in the Blackboard environment asynchronously. Um, so that will be great to hear from him. And then at 11:05, for roughly a half hour, I'll just come back to you and talk a little bit about logistics and next steps of getting your course going. Any questions you have, hopefully we can tackle at that point. And I'll talk a little bit about intellectual property because I know this tends to be a topic that concerns faculty, especially as they're building their content and really getting into it, as a lot of you are now. You'll want to know what is okay to use, what's not okay. A lot of this is done on a case-by-case basis, but I have some guidelines to share with you, things to keep in mind from an intellectual property perspective. Then around 11:35, that's our plan. I'll turn it over to Jose, and he's going to do an introduction to the certification checklist. So that's the checklist that you will use in certifying your course to go live. It's now up to 52 points on that checklist. It was 45, but the federal government released some new standards for distance and online courses that we incorporated into that checklist. So he'll go over that. And then we'll break for lunch from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock and come back at 1 o'clock to work with Jose, who will do a deep dive on that certification checklist and cover everything accessibility, designing with active learning, all about universal design and backward design, presenting lecture material on VoiceThread. He'll go over tools to use in order to create your videos. You know, we like Screencast-O-Matic a lot. He'll cover those asynchronous learning concepts, discussions in Blackboard versus VoiceThread and other tools, student presentations, student assessments and feedback. And Jose has this great epic toolkit he'll show you that he put together, all the tools and technology that you might find handy as an online instructor. And maybe he'll get into gamification and strategies for how to gamify your course, which is always fun. And I think if he has time, he might even present a game in the Kahoots game. So that's our agenda. You can see why we started on time, because we've just got so much packed in here and we're hoping to wrap by 3. So I will now turn it over to, do I have anything else? I'll come back to this. I'm going to just turn this over to Jeffrey, and you can go ahead with your student engagement portion. Is that okay, Jeffrey?
I'm ready.
I'm going to stop sharing, I guess. And
yeah. Thank you for sharing with me. So let me just go in here, and you're going to get the infinite mirror for a moment, guys. Okay. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I want you to know that I would like, with maybe Jose's help, to monitor the chat if you have any questions, or if you have any comments along the way. You all can see my screen. Thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So let's let the good times roll. So I'm just going to go in presentation mode. Hopefully, there we go. Okay, so when we talk about online presence and course management, we're going to really try to look both at the holistics and the mechanics of how you can keep your students engaged in a fully online class. And I just want to, start by saying that technology is just a tool to leverage pedagogy. So I'm going to use a cooking analogy. You can't use a great sauce to cover a bad fish. And so the mechanics of your pedagogy and your strategy with your students are what actually make the technology work for you as a tool of communication, articulation, and interaction. So when we talk about faculty presence, we're talking about being present and interactive without disincentivizing the students. Sometimes in let's say a face-to-face classroom, a professor can run on and not recognize that the students are not um, really engaged. And in a fully online class, you really need to think about ways that you can get students to interact with the assignments and also with each other in a synchronous way. It's also knowing when to communicate one-to-one. When you see students who tend to be on, for example, the quieter side, or they're not quite keeping up with what's going on, you can nurture student interaction with empathy and good humor. It's often the case where professors will feel a little offended by a student not showing up properly or not interacting properly, but a lot of times it's because they are either not comfortable or they're not used to being reached out to. And so you can do this, and in an asynchronous mode, the beauty of it is there's a pace that's controlled both by the teacher and the student, which is why it's very important to also set the pace by letting students know when you expect to hear from them and when they are expected to do what, helping them to manage their time. Also, designing assignments that promote interaction. And when I say interaction in this case, it is not only about interacting with other students and yourself in the class, it's also giving them assignments that ask them to go out into the world and interact with the environment around them, and thereby expanding the base of their experience to go beyond just the realm of what's in Blackboard. Designing assignments that take students away from their computers is really something that requires a little bit more planning, and you have to allow them time because they're used to setting their own schedules in an asynchronous environment. Also, asking great questions that require reflection or comparative analysis. So, for example, in a discussion of any kind, whether it be VoiceThread, Padlet, or just a conventional forum, asking students to comment on something they have seen or read is valuable, but it's even more valuable when you ask them to compare it to something else. And how you do that really depends on your discipline and what you're doing, but they learn a lot more when they are asked to compare, reflect, and evaluate. So let's talk about student participation challenges. These are students that most of you are familiar with. Wendy is the first poster. She says that she's very social and interactive online, and she's often the first one to participate. Now, the first one to participate sometimes is also the most outgoing, which means that they can also sometimes intimidate other people. So sometimes it's good to kind of set a goal for what's expected for the first posts, no matter how they're done, so that it opens the door for other people to interact with them. Ron likes to wait and watch. He waits till he sees what other students are doing before he participates. And there are ways in many of the programs that we use to not allow students to see the other work until they have posted their work first. Abby is the writer. She writes long, thoughtful posts, but she's very shy about using other types of media. And Michael, as an ESL student, prefers text-based communication because it allows him time to edit as opposed to the more spontaneous use of audio or video. They also have feelings about the challenges in online learning. Wendy has problems working alone. She feels isolated at times and she has trouble with her motivation. I think that this is a very common complaint across all the different types of students we have, that both time management and motivation are things that they need to constantly refresh and work on in order to engage more deeply. Um, the Ron feels like there's too much reading, and for that reason, he tends to maybe not give as much attention to keeping up with his assignments and discussions because he already has an approach that says, "Why do I have to read all this stuff?" So giving purpose to everything you give them to do and contextualizing it in as to what its value is really helps. So for Abby, video and audio intimidates her. And a lot of times you can help break the ice with that by setting a good example yourself, not by just having super professional, fantastic delivery of audio and video, but by also allowing your missteps, your coughs, your squeaks, your whoops moments to show in your videos and your interactions, so you make it much more of a table, like a kitchen table conversation than a Cecil B. DeMille product. And Michael feels also it takes a long time for him to read and write all the assignments, and he feels self-conscious. So in some cases, like with Michael, inviting him into an office hour where he actually interacts with you in audio and video is a great way to read the room with him and to speak to him. The only synchronous things you really do are office hours, barring an emergency, but they can be a great way to encourage and incentivize the students to interact. So I'm sure Tammy and Jose will talk to you about how to do office hours and when to do them. But I can tell you that from my own personal experience, and I've been teaching online, hybrid, and face-to-face for going into my 17th year now. If you really watch these students in the first 3 weeks, the patterns of behavior emerge very, very quickly. And sometimes just a gentle, warm, friendly discussion can really get them on track, especially when they feel that you care and that you're actually watching and reading and listening to what they're doing. Okay, slide, move ahead. Okay, so this presentation is available to you. I believe that both Jose and Antonia have the link and they'll give it to you. So some of these slides are text heavy as reference tools for you. I'm just going to paraphrase what I've got here. But as an instructor, you'll think about interaction, facilitation, narration, assessment, and feedback. And I break assessment and feedback into two different things because sometimes you can give feedback without actually assessing them with a grade. So when you think about your presence, it's a delicate balance between not enough and too much. If you overmanage the students, they'll feel like they're mice in mazes that are being pushed through a certain pattern. If you are backed off too much, they will wander and drift sometimes. So it's just finding that right amount. And for those of you with a lot of experience teaching, I'm sure you'll agree that if you've taught the same class many times, there's also a crowd psychology to the class, whether it's fully online or face to face. There are personalities that emerge, and there's a sense and an atmosphere of what the course environment is like. Make an effort to address the students by their preferred name and nurture the shy students, which I've already said a few different ways, and ask students to reflect and comment. Um, I recommend also that you do something that I call a mid-semester review. And this often allows you to have a conversation with your students when you ask them these three simple questions. First, how do you assess, this is like in the 6th, 7th, or 8th week of the semester. How do you assess your progress in our class? And what is your plan to improve your performance for the remainder of the semester. And I would add, no matter how well you're doing. And then the third question is, how can I help? Now, I recommend doing this and giving students an opportunity to engage directly with you by writing this to you as their statement and their self-assessment. Um, and then, of course, the online office hours. Back to the mid-semester review, though, I will tell you that I find that student self-assessments are often very candid. They seldom are loaded with excuses, although you always get a few of those. And a lot of times the goals they set for themselves are quite appropriate, for the course and for their needs. And by keeping track of their performance and looking at these mid-semester reviews, it can really help you to focus some of your efforts. Now, Jose is going to talk about this more later, but by the way, these links are live in this presentation, so you can go right to them. But universal design really helps you to round out what you're doing by exploring multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. So these three criteria really are where technology comes in as conduits for this. Engagement certainly in a Padlet, a VoiceThread, or even a conventional discussion forum. Representation can be a great opportunity for peer review. One thing that you might consider is how peer review can be used inside of a discussion forum of some sort. You can certainly do that in Padlet, VoiceThread, but you can also do the old-fashioned Blackboard forum where you can actually have students post their presentations and then encourage other students using criteria and prompts that you design to help the students by providing a peer review. So by offering them different ways of engaging and representing, you're also providing them with methods for response and navigation, optimizing access to the tools and assistive technologies they need to interact. And I think the idea is not to, and this is my opinion, actually everything here is my opinion. My opinion is that less is more. So if you have tools that are working well for you, you do not have to have a menu as long as a diner would have of all the different kind of tools you need to use this semester. Frankly, I think that many people could easily teach Blackboard using Blackboard tools plus a VoiceThread or Padlet and Screencast-O-Matic, and that would really cover the gamut of all these criteria. Next, thinking about multiple modalities in each assignment is a practice that improves student engagement. So you're designing assignments where students use their senses and skills in a single lesson. So by asking them to do things that are visual or incorporate music, objects, experiences, poetry, writing, and collaboration, the students have a much, much higher retention. And I also want to add that when I see Brian is here, he might even want to chime in on this. Journaling is a very, very powerful tool, both cognitively and in terms of retention of information. I can tell you in my online courses, I give them journal assignments and they submit their journal pages on a biweekly basis. And this is their reflections on prompts I give them about what they're doing, how it's going, what their challenges are. And it constantly allows them to contextualize what they're doing in writing of some form or video. I let them do video journals, as well. But the act of getting them to actually collect, organize, and be conscious of their learning process greatly improves this. And this is true in any modality, but in an online course, you really have a really good reason to encourage really great writing opportunities. So this is just a quote from Design Principles in Online Teaching. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do agree strongly that good design is as little design as possible. Too much is too much. And the author here, Ali Drian, says, in my professional development sessions, I recommend that online teachers examine the purpose of the tools they use and only those that support the achievement of learning objectives. So when you are teaching an online course and you look at your course description and learning outcomes, that really is the map for how every course is taught, regardless of discipline, um, or um, or whether it's visual or liberal studies or anything else in between. Brian just added here, yes, any kind of reflective writing, journaling, preparing a reflection letter, explaining what they've accomplished, all the commas are in the right place, and what they would do if they had more time to submit with a major project is, and you can brainstorm with him. And actually, this is also a great point, is that the writing studio is a great place to explore how to construct these assignments. So I definitely want to give a shout out to Brian and Sarah and the team. And you will come away with an assignment that addresses the objectives of your course, but also engages the student in a multitude of ways that is far more, what's the word, satisfying, I think, when a student reflects on their learning. So let's talk about social presence. Thanks for that, Brian. Um, Students need to feel connected to their online course community, and you can encourage them by interacting with each other as well as their professor, but encourage them to use social media tools to follow people. And I'm not saying count posts or even ask them to hand in what they're doing, but you can ask them to share what they're doing. Um, in that Instagram and Twitter are great places to follow thought leaders. And whether they be in Instagram or Twitter, that is their bread and butter, is getting those things out there and asking them to share with the class some of the things they're seeing and hearing. And also, I've mentioned this a few times now, Padlet Blackboard groups and group journals. By the way, groups and journals in Blackboard are quite powerful, even though they're ugly, because Blackboard is ugly. I'm not going to say it any differently, but it works. And it's an effective tool, even though it is definitely showing its age. Interactive discussion tools, Jose is going to cover this in much more detail. And I want to mention collaborative assignments and group work. You need to be very careful in those that you are structuring interaction, not just the collaboration. To say let the group figure it out is a recipe for failure. Okay, so for example, when I do group work on in my online class, I ask the students to hand in weekly status reports where each of them writes a narrative of what their objectives were, what they've achieved, and what they've done as a group. And they need to share these on one Google Doc. So that means if, like, Brian, Jose, and I are all in a group together, which would be a lot of fun, by the way, guys, we each have to contribute to a common document that reports to the professor what we've done together and apart. I give credit for it because it is work for them to do, but it also helps you to monitor what they're doing and to interact with them in helpful ways. I've mentioned online office hours and again, speaking in a natural voice, conversational, informal, relaxed, and prepared. Now, here's where my training in the CET really comes forward, though, is because you were the professor does not mean you were the smartest person with every single thing that your students asked. And it's really important not to try to fluff up what you're doing by sounding like you are the sole authority. It's really good to say, hey, you know what? I have information on this. Let me get back to you, and we will discuss this a little bit further, because while I can comment, I feel like I need to be better prepared. Students respect that. Now, of course, if you say that every week, after a while, they're going to wonder what you do know, but choose your times to be human. And the way I'm speaking to you is the way I speak to my students when I'm providing video, and also when I'm in the classroom. Let them know how you want to be addressed also. Some people prefer to be called professor. Some people prefer to use, just their name or even a nickname. So it's really up to you. I mentioned earlier to make sure you address students the way they want to be addressed. And the beauty of an online course is you have a moment to make a cheat sheet so you can respond to them. Because sometimes, even though they can do nicknames now, some of them don't know. So Yun Chen might be one prefer to be called Sarah, but all of her posts say Yun Chen. But if you address her as Sarah in your responses and comments, you'll be very grateful and appreciative. So being a facilitator means getting other people to do the work. There's something we say here, which is if you're the only one sweating, then the students aren't working hard enough. Okay, so being supportive, encouraging, and motivating them to apply themselves, and then the types of interactions that require them to do certain things can be very penetrating into the topic and expansive in their learning. I think that it's safe to say in general terms that students need to work on thinking more deeply and considering alternative points of view, no matter what your topic. And I have a link to the article that references this, but good facilitation is really work in the room as opposed to me doing a data dump. Now, I would like to stop for a minute and see if anybody has any questions or comments to just pop into the chat. Do any of you do a mid-semester check-in with your students now? How do you feel about working with different media and engaging your students with, like, say, journaling? I'd like to give a moment for people to pop a comment in. Tammy, did you want to add something? I saw you just show up.
Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure you knew I was here.
Oh, okay. Okay, Sophia does a mid-semester checkup. And Anne Marie, Anne Marie's thanking me for recommending it. That's a nice commercial. So if you're doing it in your face-to-face classes, it works just as well. Now, does anybody, yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm really glad. So I hope the questions I'm offering you just add value to that process. Well, Pamela, they won't know what's missing if you didn't tell them you were going to do it.
True.
Now, some people, Brian mentioned he does mid-semester meetings. You can certainly use office hours for that process too, but it can be very exhausting. And there are some people who actually consider giving a mid-semester grade, which is kind of like a grade on their participation. So Audrey, you do a Google form. What do you mean by that? Could you just explain? It's okay to open your mic. Audrey, do you want to just explain what you do with a Google form? I'm kind of curious. No, I think you must be muted. Maybe Jose, is she muted?
Let me check, Audrey.
She's getting her mic working.
Oh,
Okay. While we're waiting for Audrey to talk about Google Forms, Sophia writes, my thing is the online students are slow to answer email back. They overwhelm. then answer my email 2 to 3 weeks later. I'm going to say one thing um, about that, Sophia. Don't use email for anything in your online course except for those really important kind of formal communications regarding perhaps like a warning about performance, or something that relates to them in a way that you want to take the communication outside the course. So your students are notorious for not wanting to answer email, but if you make it part of the class, they will. And by that I mean it's part, like I grade and I want to be clear what I mean by grading. I grade mid-semester evaluations, but I grade them simply, are they done or not done? So it's just basically complete or incomplete. Okay, so Audrey just posted, what should we start doing in class? What should we stop doing in class? And what should we continue doing in class? Those are really good questions, Audrey. The only thing I would add to that is that what we're talking about um, also involves them assessing their own performance. So your questions really go to the content and the interaction, and I think that's a great thing to do. That might even be great for a discussion forum on that, but wherever you got them, I'm just encouraging the personal assessment. Okay, Carolyn says, I wish I had the time to do proper midterm status for every single one of my students. Realistically, I stick to formal midterm warnings for those who need it. Otherwise, I depend on the grading, attendance status, feedback in Blackboard for assignments at the midterm mark. And Caroline, I want to also say that I appreciate your honesty there. Not everybody has the time to do this, but I'm not recommending midterm one-to-one meetings. I just think that this could simply be something that you can just mark it complete or incomplete. But I am not also telling you that there's a right and wrong way. You know yourself and what you can actually deliver. Yeah, 3 to 4 courses, Patrice, is a big burden. I will just say, if you can look for some kind of reflective component, it will help the student to understand what they're doing by reflecting on their performance. Pamela asks, am I grading their journal assessments? Most of this stuff is graded as complete or incomplete. So basically in Blackboard, by the way, complete, incomplete does not work properly. But what you can do is just give it a 1, a 0, or nothing. So it's up to you. If you give them a 1, it just means they've completed it. If you give them a 0, it means they failed to complete it. But if you want to give them a free pass, you just don't grade it at all. But it's an opportunity for you to just flip a comment back to them about their thoughts. That's all. With the journals, it's the same thing. Another good thing to do is give shout outs once in a while in your narratives about some of the work you're seeing, giving examples. Hillary writes, with students wearing masks for in-person classes, I'm doing a virtual mid-semester check-in without masks, which is a great idea, Hillary. But this obviously is not for a fully online class. I mean, if you're really ambitious, you can certainly give that a try, but I am not suggesting that if you have 18 students that you meet with each one of them individually. But I think in a face-to-face environment, Hillary, it's a great idea to be able to see the whole kid, right? So in an online class, though, one thing I want to say in response to Patrice and Caroline is, because everything is evidence-based in a fully online asynchronous course, it's a lot more work to put the course together. But once you've got your strategy in place and things are working, the asynchronous schedule really gives you a lot more latitude for how you manage your time. In other words, you're not in a class for 3 hours, so you can pick your times and do it the way you want, as opposed to in a face-to-face class where you were always constrained by the classroom's meeting time. So I guess that's enough. All I'm providing to you guys is just recommendations to consider.
Jeffrey,
So let's just talk.
I just add to that? I just wanted to add to that
Sure.
point. I think a lot of faculty who are new to this don't realize the extent to which you will be able to repurpose feedback or start, with a document where you're giving feedback to a student that has a lot of the same elements that you might give to another student. And, being able to have a few, refer to a rubric perhaps, but have a few examples of lengthy feedback and tweak those for each student, I think you'll find that that flow gets easier, as Jeffrey's describing, even from semester to semester, but as the semester goes along. And once you have, it's so much work creating a course in the beginning, creating those lectures, creating all of that content. Once you have that all built out, you will find that flexibility and you can dedicate some time to that individual feedback. I think that's where you were going with that, right, Jeffrey?
Yes, and actually, you took one of the little tricks and tips.
Oh,
I
okay.
use Apple Notes where I put my comments in and I paste them in because I want to be careful to address each student in a way, especially students who are doing really excellent work. You want to make sure that you're urging the excellent student on, but I do copy and paste comments that I'll tag on. So like sometimes I'll like try to add context to each comment by saying one of the purposes of this assignment was to blah 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 blah, and you have done that effectively, or ineffectively or whatever. But there's a lot of phraseology that you can use, but don't just copy paste without trying to inject a little something in there that identifies them. So let's just talk about assessments now. Students earn grades. You don't give anything away. And when you're clear about that, then students will gradually recognize that the ball is in their court to participate. Now, I tend to be soft with the students in the first 3 to 4 weeks. They have to learn your teaching style and also understand how to navigate the course. But you are the best arbiter of how to assess that student's performance. But if every single thing is based on A, B, C, D, F, after a while, it becomes a meritocracy where they're really just aiming for the grades. So sometimes you could even use a rubric that does not have scores on it, and then just give them a ungraded assignment where you show them with the rubric how they performed in that particular area. And students love rubrics because that means you're using the same ruler for the whole gang. Students want to be in a community of learning. The Online Learning Consortium in 2017 did a very big survey. And students, 57% cited the importance of being able to regularly engage with classmates and instructors during their online classes. 27% desiring more contact with the instructor. That's a really important number, and I think it's actually generally higher than that. And 22% asking for more facilitated engagement among students in the class. And here I just want to pause and say that the students really do not know how to structure asynchronous conversations without some help and guidance from you. So ways that you can do that are to give them helpful prompts with an assignment, encouraging them to say reflect on or maybe if it's a reading, and again, Brian's probably much better at that I am, but if you're assigning a reading, one of the first questions might be to summarize the reading very briefly, citing some key points. The second one might be to identify aspects of the reading and relate it to other things you're doing in that course or other things that relate to that particular domain of interest. And the third one might be to share an experience that relates in some way to the topic. And so you're asking them to identify ways that they've read and thought about it, and also to connect with it in a way that might be more personal or related to their professional development. Avoid using too much text. I look at some courses where there's a wall of words, and that wall can be intimidating indeed. Honestly, I have the same problem in my courses. So what I do is after I've created everything, I go back and I try very, very hard to edit my content down to get it as much to the point as possible. And I still find it challenging sometimes to identify ways to simplify what I'm writing down to exactly what is expected. But it's a really good goal. And if you're writing, especially like an announcement that's longer than a limerick, they're probably not going to read the whole thing. So let's try to feed them in bites. If there is a lot of text, you can break it up into sections so they can eat, chew, digest, and then move on to the next point. Now, here's a really important one for all of you, because when you start teaching online, you really want to make the course as exciting and interesting as possible. But any of you world travelers out there know that you can wait in line at the airport and see people with 4 trunks who are going away for 1 week, and people who are going away for a month who have 1 carry-on. The economy of what you're doing does not mean that you're compromising the quality of your course by trying to make it as simple as possible for you to leverage your knowledge and your ability in each and everything you're doing. If you get involved in technologies you are not fully comfortable with, you can spend hours sometimes trying to figure out why something's not working, while another option might be better to consider. And certainly when you meet with Jose on certifications, he'll discuss that. But you could also come to him and say, for my online course, before it gets certified, I'd like to find a way to make this simpler, and he can make recommendations. I can also be helpful in this regard, but I do not certify online courses, but I can advise you in a broader sense. But this is probably the most important thing. Tammy, wouldn't you agree that when people build courses that are very cumbersome, they really they become slaves to their courses?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we see a lot of that. It's a really important point.
Then you go on, then you feel desperate. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I get sweaty and upset sometimes when I see what's happening. That's not what I expected. The more you build, the more you need to maintain. And so I love this scene from Modern Times where the technology actually drives him crazy, because we can all relate to that. Again, who you are a mentor, you are an example, you are a teacher, but you're also don't want to be a slave. And this is why sometimes people lapse into heavy lecture-based courses, because they want to deliver the information in the most articulate way. The pedagogy demands that we find ways to do that without just doing major dumps of information on them. So these are all things that I think will be very helpful to you. So the final tips, this is really just a summary of some of the things we talked about. Think about the setting a rhythm and a pace to what's going on. I'll give you an example that there are some people who will try to do 2 separate discussions within a 2-week period, where sometimes you might want to give them a more challenging thing to discuss by giving them 1 week to read or to do something, and then to reflect on it and engage in conversation in the second week. So, for example, I might give an assignment that's got an extensive reading and then ask them to respond to several prompts to help them form their response. and they will post that by the end of week 1. And then then you can indicate post 1 by Monday, post 2 by Thursday, I actually have a typo here. Post 3 would be on a Saturday. And remember that it's not the same as online courses do not have the same kind of time zone as other work. So you're welcome to ask them to do things whenever you think, and these are just recommendations. I got to fix that typo, it's bothering me. Um, and um, and then your interaction in there can be very encouraging, supportive, and adding context. But in Blackboard, for example, and there are ways to do this in VoiceThread, and I think so in Padlet, you can hide everything from the student until they make their initial post. And then you can encourage students to engage with students who have not been engaged with as they go through, because you do want to nurture interaction amongst all the students, as long as they are functioning in a certain level, meaning that they're participating throughout the forum. Students recognize how important discussion is to online learning. So it doesn't take a lot when you're grading them to simply let them know that they're not participating. And this is something I do that's a little draconian. If I ask them to make 3 posts over a period of a week and they do all 3 on the due date, they instantly are graded down to a D, because that's not a discussion. I'm giving them minimum credit for what they've done, but they have not interacted and discussed, and therefore they don't deserve credit no matter how beautiful their comments are. I don't know if anybody has any other suggestions about how to do that. I
Well, can I
do
just
like,
add? Yeah, I mean, we do have a rubric available for discussions, and I would recommend you take a look at that because it really gets into detail about grading discussions and what you expect. And if you expect one comment by Tuesday and then 2 more follow-up comments by Sunday in response to their peers, I think that's a great place to specify it in the rubric so that students know that they will be graded on that.
the other, absolutely. The other thing about setting goals for the posts is it makes it easier for you, the teacher, to decide when to go in and take a look.
Mhm.
Do not run in and out of course constantly waiting to see what the posts are. The students need to do their job. So if you're expecting posts by Monday, wait till Tuesday and take a look on Tuesday and see what they're doing. And if you see people who are not posting, you can take note of it, but don't obsess, because sometimes they'll spread them out anyway. But I just don't recommend rewarding students for brilliant work that is not interacted with the class at the appropriate asynchronous schedules that you're creating, or at least guiding them. Um, Another thing that you can do is, if they're doing handwritten notes, you can also consider allowing them to submit their scanned notes and narratives. I'm sure that the writing studio would agree that there's a lot of proof that cursive writing actually has a much higher memory retention than keystrokes. And I actually give my students 2 things for every class. One of them is I give them a reading called the pen is mightier than the keyboard. And I also give them a reading on how to critique before they do anything like peer reviews. One of the readings I've recommended over the years, I still recommend, is a reading by Scott Berkun, Berkun, called How to Give and Receive Critique. If anybody wants to look that up and throw it in the chat, I think you'll find it a very easy way to help guide students, not only on how to give critical input, but also how to receive it. Because let's face it, if you can't take it, how are you going to give it? So it's Scott Berkun, Berkun, How to Give and Receive Criticism, I believe. And Scott Berkun, by the way, is a great writer. that his writing is very good for students. He talks a lot about ways to engage and to also the mythologies about accomplishments and learning that there it is. Very good. Thank you, Jose. So I do recommend looking at his other work. And let's see, we're getting down to the end of my time with you. So my final words before we just open it up for any comments or questions is a bad day or even a bad week does not a bad course make. Students understand and appreciate when you are making an effort on their behalf. And with that, I'm going to just open it up if anybody has any comments or questions. And let me stop sharing. As I said, this is available to you. I'm clicking on the wrong thing, you believe it? Okay, there I am. I also want to give a little plug to the CET. We have a lot of resources in our web pages for you. This is a link to the Teaching with Technology pages, but we also have a lot of recordings of events, many of which we've done in collaboration with the Office of Online Learning. We also have some really interesting new stuff coming up there. We just recently did a two-part series on the metaverse and NFTs and so on. And I think that you'll find some of that stuff very, very useful for you. Anybody have any questions for me? I hope what I gave you was helpful and encouraging. Hi, Hillary.
Hi there. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I'm not sure I understood your comment about like meetings face to face with students. I was planning on applying that to my online course, and I meet with them for about 10 minutes a piece.
Well, office hours is fine for that. I think that you caught me backpedaling a little bit, Hillary, only because not everybody can meet with 20 students for 10 minutes each, and so they find other ways to do that. But your office hours are the synchronous opportunity to really deal with the students who are particularly needy or in need of your attention. But if you can do it, Hillary, I mean, all more power to you.
I mean, I've been doing it for a really long time, and I can't even imagine anything more enjoyable, just in terms of finally getting to be with a student one-on-one, kind of honing in things we've been doing, giving them that attention that they need to go forward. And even in an online course where, it's removed to some degree, it just seems like a great opportunity to connect with them in a way that you're just not getting to do for the rest of the semester.
I completely agree with you, but I'm also, what's the word, tempering my comments to not set an expectation that everybody can rise to that level. I also do group meetings where, and Brian just put up a comment about synchronous engagement.
To that. Thank you, Brian, for the question. I was just about to jump in. So for online courses, we want to be really careful about synchronous requirements. We cannot require that a student come to our office hours just because they could be in a different time zone, they could be working full time. So what we've recommended is to say you want to have that 10-minute talk every semester, put up a sign-up sheet or say by appointment so that you can accommodate. So say my preference is for office hours, but if you can please meet with me some other time by appointment, that would be great. Even for, group work, that kind of thing, that's why we say groups should not be any larger than 3, because if students need to meet synchronously with each other at some point, they should be able to do that according to their own schedule and what works best for them. So we're slowly getting to the point where we're allowing some synchronous. It used to be that we just said, don't do any synchronous at all because it really hinders those students who are at a distance in other time zones, and the reason they sign up for an online course is often because they are working full time or have some other commitments. But in general, we do think this is okay if the student's schedule can be accommodated and if there's no penalty whatsoever for that student who can't. So some faculty will have a guest speaker at a certain time, 12 o'clock on Wednesday, during, they'll say, please attend this, but if you can't, it will be recorded and you can catch up with it at a later time. That's perfect because then students do have the opportunity to interact, but they're not penalized in any way from a grade perspective or a content perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And of course, during like in a face-to-face regular class, you try to put it during class time. I try to put it during class time. It's really instead of a midterm.
Yeah, they have that time.
But of course, with an asynchronous course, it would be completely different.
Right.
Well, Hillary, what you're going to find in the asynchronous environment is you're going to adapt and you're going to use that same informal way of making contact with students. And you'll find different ways to do that. I personally use the grade book very heavily for that. In addressing them personally in some of their comments, not every single assignment or every single grade, but I do try to put things in there that command their attention and also acknowledge, what they're doing. I see Caroline mentions she makes video comments to the students. Now, I think in Brightspace, but I know in Canvas, Jose, just jump in here for a second. I think that you can actually make video comments in the Grade Center.
Yes, Brightspace.
So one little trick I'll share with you guys is that voice to text on a Mac in particular, I can't speak to the PC, is also a great way to do comments, where I'll just start speaking and the voice to text works really well. On your Mac, the way you do that is to go to Preferences and go to Keyboard. Actually, I have like 3 minutes, right? And Tammy, till 11:05?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I'm going to show you very quickly where it is because it's such a great tool. So what I'm going to just share my screen again. And if you want to open up your own personal system preferences, you can follow along and then I'll demonstrate very quickly. So let me just open up my preferences. Sorry for the infinite view there. Okay, so my preferences are right here. And if I go to Keyboard and I look over here, I can go to Dictation. And I have dictation on, so you can see the microphone is responding to what I'm doing. And you can also set the hotkeys, right? So I have it set so I can press either command key twice and make a comment. So if I open up a new note here and I hit the command key twice, I can now speak to my students, and it doesn't do every single thing right, but it corrects them sometimes. So that you might have to fix a word like I do not canal. I can speak to them. And anyway, as you are practicing what you speak, you get more and more accurate with it. And this works out really nicely to speak to them in an informal way. And I just tell them to forget about punctuation because I can, if I want, comma, punctuate as I speak, period, and then begin a new sentence. So I hope this little tip is helpful to you.
That's nice, Jeffrey.
That is my finale. Unless anybody has any other questions, because I have 4 minutes left to my allotted time.
I just want to point out the beauty of VoiceThread and giving feedback also. I know Jose will also touch on this, but if you give an assignment in VoiceThread, VoiceThread will allow you to actually not only record your voice over that assignment, but record your doodles over that assignment, point to things, draw on it, create essentially a video of its own. So, that's another nice way to give feedback that feels synchronous because you're playing VoiceThread back in a way that, lumps different feedback pieces together. Feels synchronous, but it's truly asynchronous. So that's just a nice tool and a plug. I'm sure you'll touch on that later,
Oh
Jose.
yeah, it's a great tool. I use the voice to text primarily in the grade center, just simply because my keystroking is ick,
But
so
it's
I can
nice.
think so much faster than I can type, but I can talk faster than I think sometimes. Anyway, it was a great pleasure to present to you all, and
Jeffrey.
you know where I am if you need me, but if you do want to contact me, here's a link where my appointment times are available. Again, I am not your online instructor on how to teach online, but I can help you actually to enhance some of the things you're doing and give you feedback on your pedagogy as well. So I'm going to get out of here now.
Thank you, Jeffrey. We're really happy you could join us.
Thank you so much for asking me, Tammy. I was looking forward.
It was
Thanks, Jeff.
really great. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Jeffrey. Have a great
Thanks,
weekend.
Jeffrey.
Okay, so I'm going to jump back over to that day 2 presentation. So let me just share that. Oh, does Jeffrey have to stop? No, I don't think he does. Okay, you guys can see this, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So let me get over to where I left off. I just wanted to do some reminders. I didn't want to hold up Jeffrey, but I wanted to just make sure everyone knows your point of contacts for help going forward. So today's the last day that we're going to meet synchronously as a group, but we still will be working with you whenever you need us. So I'm, of course, in B504. And then Antonia and Jose are in B508. I would say the easiest way to get in touch with us is always going to be email, because if we're on the train or wherever we are, we can get back to you quickly. We also have an administrator on staff. I'm not sure if I pointed that out to you, Lynn Kelly. She's part-time, she's 3 days a week. But she's really great for anything you need in your course from a user perspective. So say you have someone observing your course and you need someone added to your course, just shoot her an email. She'll do that for you. There will be a time where you will need to be observed. Even tenured faculty, the first 2 semesters they teach online need to be observed by a peer. It's in the contract, a peer in their department. So you will need to at some point add a colleague to your course, and Lynn Kelly's a great contact for that kind of thing. And then she'll remove them when they're done observing you. We also have Margaret Bishop. We pay her on an hourly basis to help with basic Blackboard. She's great with the grade book. She's great if you want to brush up on your Blackboard skills. So do reach out to me if you would like a session with her, and I will set that up for you if you feel, especially if you feel like you need some help with Blackboard. And then let's see, a question just popped up. Are there guidelines? So Brian, this is such a weird thing. I have guidelines that I give to departments for observations, but departments are free to use them or to design their own. So I can certainly send you what I have. I have things to keep in mind when you're observing a course. I also don't ever see those results. So those observations are kept within the department. I don't get to see them. So it's kind of this, strange external thing that happens. But I definitely support it, and I remind departments that it's time to do it. But I will share those guidelines with if you need them, or with your department. So, and also, yes, I will definitely, yeah, I'll put them, that's a good idea, Patrice. I'll put them in the content area. Let me just jot that down. I mean, if you're in a department that has been doing online courses for a while, they probably have the guidelines all set that they're going to use. So you may just want to ask your chair about it. But I'll share my guidelines, and I don't know if your department's adopted them or not, but I'll certainly share those. And then just a reminder, Rob Kurakowski, he's the one that did that first day of training. He said he would be happy if you want to reach out to him to follow up on any of those questions or that you might have following that. And Open SUNY, I just want to give them a shout out because they are wonderful. And I don't know how many of you have reached out to them, their help desk. That's open 7 days a week. It's really helpful. I mean, for all Blackboard, Collaborate, Blackboard Ally questions. Because they're open on the weekends, they're a great resource, especially for students too. So if you could, make sure your students know about it. It's all over the Blackboard homepage. We have the phone number under the help and on the main Blackboard homepage, but they're a great resource. And they often know, if there's something going on with Blackboard, like a little just problem that Blackboard is experiencing, they will know about it before we do very often. So if you're experiencing some kind of glitch in Blackboard and you just want to find out about it quickly on a Tuesday evening, I would recommend calling that SUNY help desk number. They're always really helpful and nice. Let's see if I've covered any questions here. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Just a few reminders here. So now's the point where you're going to make sure after today that you finished the online portion of the course. I believe if Antonia is here, it would be great to hear from her about what they should do to finish the course. I believe there's a survey at the end that they should be completing, that everyone should be completing when you finish your course. And then once you do finish the course, you will want to make sure that, of course, you're familiar with the checklist. I'm kind of jumping down, making sure that you have everything in place for certifying your course with Jose. That 52-point checklist we mentioned, Jose will do a deep dive into that later today, but you'll want to make sure that your course has all of that. And then I just want to, yes.
Sorry to
Hi.
interrupt, but if you'd like me to just speak real quickly.
Yes, please.
In the course information folder, there is another really short checklist that I put in there that tells you, everything that you have to have done for your course. It includes the certification and the curriculum committee stuff. So just take a look at that, and that's something that you can just use as a visual guide for all the steps you have to make sure you have completed. And then the end of course survey that Tammy mentioned, that's hidden right now, but we are going to make it available either today or early next week. So just make sure that you fill that out after you've completed everything. And then if you're, lastly, if you're wondering if you have any work that's outstanding that you need to do, just go into the course schedule, look at everything there. It tells you everything that is due and when, and you can look at the grade book to compare whether you've gotten a grade on that or not. And again, the grade book is really there just to show you how it looks for students. It's not like we're giving you a grade in this course. It's really just pass, fail, or whether you attended or not is what we're looking for. And so you can use that to kind of orient you as far as what work is done. And then you can always feel free to email me if you're really not sure, and I can check for you.
Great. Thank you, Antonia.
That covers everything.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, so Antonia is the one that processes the stipends, and we do look at whether you finished the online portion of the course and also certified the course with Jose before we can process those stipends. So just important to wrap that up. I do also want to ask if there's anyone in the training right now who is planning to teach a course in the fall and is unsure about whether that course has passed through curriculum committee. Could you let me know in the chat if that's the case? Because curriculum committee's last meeting is on Monday, I believe. Okay, so Hillary, do you know if your class has been taught before online by anyone else? Okay, Patrice is waiting for curriculum committee. Okay, so Hillary, did you write an online course statement? Okay, so we have to find out where that is. So I'm going to check. Remind me the course number again, Hillary. Okay, I'm going to check it again and see where that stands, if it's gone through curriculum committee. Because if it doesn't go through curriculum committee this semester, it cannot be taught in the fall. They will not consider it for fall offering. So Caroline, it's a great question. What happens if the course doesn't run and we've done all the preparation for it? So we technically can't process your stipend until you actually start teaching the course. So hopefully you will teach it the next semester if it doesn't run the semester you're planning on. But this is why we ask the department to approve courses for delivery online, because the department knows which courses are going to fill up, which courses are going to run, which courses are needed. And you are selected for online training based on department need. So hopefully it will run. If you are doubting now that it's going to run, you may not want to certify your course right now, because it is a lot of work to build your course and certify it. You may want to get some assurance from your chair that the course will run before you build out the entire course. So I think I'm not sure what you mean by your department has outstanding issues.
Sorry, I'll just chime in. Maybe I could talk to you
Yeah.
one-on-one, because it's a complicated issue and I'm seeking those assurances and I'm getting them, but I don't really, I see the numbers registered for my class and I'm concerned.
Okay. Yeah. So if you want to talk at lunchtime, I'll be around, or right after training lets out for the day at 3 o'clock, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, lunch would be great. That's great.
Okay, so why don't we just hang on while everyone jumps off for the lunch. And then Hillary, thank you. I understand you need to go teach, but I'll look up E149. And Patrice, yes, you're waiting on curriculum committee, but I know about your course, so that should be going through, I believe. Okay, thanks, Antonia. Antonia's put the checklist of the things that need to be completed before teaching online. That's great. Okay, so, and Caroline, Harvey. Okay, great. Thank you all. So anyone else that has a concern about their course being passed by curriculum committee? Okay, just let me know if something comes up, because now we're definitely coming down to the wire in terms of curriculum committee's last meeting that's coming up. Okay, so I just wanted to go over a few intellectual property guidelines for just things to consider when you're building your online course in terms of intellectual property. First of all, I'm not the expert here at the college on intellectual property. FIT has a policy, and I encourage you to look it up. This presentation is in the training course, so you can use these links and check out this full intellectual property policy put together by FIT. The latest is from April 2017. But some highlights are that, faculty created work. I get this question a lot. Do faculty own their work? And the answer is yes. So any content that you create for a course is your content that you own from the moment you create it. And this includes the syllabus. It does not include the department's course of study for the course. That officially belongs to the department. But you do own your syllabus. You do own all your content for your course. Similarly, students own content created for the courses that they are taking. So anything a student creates for your course, that student owns it. So the exceptions here are employee work. So my presentation here that I'm giving, that's owned by FIT. And also any special projects that you might be brought on for and perhaps given a stipend for, those types of things could fall under FIT owned work. So just wanted to get that squared away so that you know that you do own your content. I do get questions, just going back a second, you know, if a faculty member decides they're all set to teach a course, but then they decide that they can't at the very last minute, can we just take their course and run it with someone else? Technically, we're not allowed to do that. Sometimes, very often, I would say the faculty member who does that says, okay, teach my course with this content, but it is up to the instructor to share their material. So adding content to Blackboard, you want to make sure that you're using content that you own or that is open source. So anything that you own that you're sharing, of course, there's no problem with sharing that with your students. I would encourage you to protect your work with a Creative Commons license. Not sure how many of you are familiar with Creative Commons, but they've been in existence for a long time. I worked with them on a lot of content when I was working back at MIT, you know, 14, 15 years ago. And it's a great way to allow use of your work, allow a sharing of your work, but to put some requirements like that it can't be used for profit. Those types of things can't be changed unless you want it to be changed. I have a really great video about Creative Commons. Maybe we can show that at the end just so you can understand what Creative Commons is all about if you're not familiar with them already. So anyway, you can use content that you own in your courses, and then you can also use open source content. There are a ton of open source resources, including works by the US government and other works online. Also, linking is completely fine in your course. So anything that you can link to, it does not violate copyright if you're linking to YouTube videos or any content that's already open on the web. I would add the caveat that links also disappear sometimes. So this means that you will want to check those links before teaching a new semester or make sure that they're working right before the assignment opens. We have had, unfortunately, some cases where professors have required a series to be watched on Netflix, but then as Netflix does, they took that content away. So that can happen too. So those types of things are a little scary as you're launching your course, especially when you're requiring subscriptions. Some faculty require a subscription to Netflix as part of their course costs, and then that content goes away. So just important to be aware of that type of stuff. Brian, thank you for pointing out that Carly, I actually just emailed Carly about a question I have. Carly in the library is a great resource for IP, and you can go to her with questions. And I'm also constantly asking her to weigh in on these guidelines. She's helped me with these guidelines, and I just had a fair use question for her that I emailed her today. So she is a really good resource for that. Just an idea of what types of works can be copyrighted. So, you know, everything on this list can certainly be copyrighted. That includes literary works, musical, dramatic works, choreographic works, graphics, motion pictures, sound recordings, architectural works, you know, all of that can be copyrighted. So you may want to be aware as you're using content, be aware of that copyright if it exists. What cannot be copyrighted? So all of these things really cannot be copyrighted, including ideas, theories, concepts. I worked for MIT OpenCourseWare several years back, and you know they're the open public site that publishes content, and we did a lot of commissioning of redraws. So you know we would take diagrams from textbooks and have our team in India do some redraws, and then we were allowed to use those images because it's not the idea that's copyrighted, it's not the theory, it's the representation of that idea. So we would actually do redraws and be able to publish those. So procedures, methods, you know, facts, titles, all of these things can't be copyrighted, you know, and then of course anything that is common property, standard calendars, height and weight charts, works of the US government. So that's just a, something I think is important to be aware of in terms of copyright. So of course you may be asking about fair use and what you can use as an educator in fair use. And a lot of things do fall under fair use. You see there are, I believe there's a fair use, the Teach Act, that allows for copyrighted material to be used without acquiring permission. And that can include for the purposes of teaching. Now, there are questions that you will want to ask when you're determining which content falls under fair use. And this resource that I've pasted here, this lab guide from University of Rhode Island, has a really good page on determining what falls into fair use and what you might ask yourself as you're looking at, you know, is this content really falling under fair use? So, you know, they break it down into different questions that you might want to ask, such as the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is it for nonprofit educational purposes. So, of course, you'd fall into that educational bucket there. What is the nature of the copyrighted work? And the amount of the portion used. So this is a big thing because reasonable and limited clips of work are often permitted. It's, you know, what, who's defining what that reasonable and limited clip is or what the portion is. So, you know, if you're using a paragraph of a copyrighted work, I would say that definitely falls under fair use. If you're using a chapter, is that really falling under fair use? That's a question that we need to weigh. And a lot of this is on a case-by-case basis. And if you do have a question, we can certainly go to Carly. This is the type of stuff I ask her about. And then, of course, the effect of the use upon the potential market or value of the copyrighted work. So if you're giving away a chapter of a textbook that otherwise would need to be purchased, it seems that that would not fall under fair use. So there are, this link is a really good resource for determining fair use. I would also say there's another, University of Texas has another really good resource if you're questioning the content that you're considering and whether that's fair use. So I wish I had more clear answers than that. A lot of it is just sort of looking at it and trying to make a determination about if it falls under fair use. But definitely reach out to me or to Carly if you have any questions about that. And we can, you know, try to tackle it on a case-by-case basis. So then, you know, there's so much more to talk about with intellectual property, but those are just some highlights, things I thought that online instructors should be aware of. I think that's it for this presentation. Does anybody want to discuss further? I mean, Brian, you may have something to add here in terms of intellectual property and your experiences guiding students. No?
I mean, nothing specific. I do think draw on the resources available to you. You know, if you have a, you know, when in doubt, just look to whatever resources you can and talk to Carly.
Right.
I do think mostly just keep in mind attribution and the importance of that. And, you know, if you are doing your due diligence to make sure that you're giving credit where credit's due, I mean, that can save you a lot of hassle most of the time. So
for sure. Yeah, definitely. And that is, you'll see that in the checklist for certifying courses. There's a piece about copyright there, you know, making sure you've looked at that. So I think that'll be helpful. Oh, Caroline, thank you so much for reminding me about this video. I just wanted to share this quick video with you about Creative Commons. This video is old. I mean, I think I used to refer to it a lot in like 2005, but I looked at all the new videos Creative Commons published, and there's nothing that quite explains it as clearly as this one video that's older, just in terms of what Creative Commons means versus copyright. So let me see if I can share my screen now and get to that. Oh, thanks, Jose. It's an oldie but a goodie. Yeah, we like that. Okay, now can you see this? Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Sorry, I like lost my window of chats. Okay, thank you. And hopefully you can hear it. Please chat in the window if you can't hear it. I'm going to play it.
When you share your creativity, you're enabling people anywhere to use it, learn from it, and be inspired by it. Take the teacher who shapes young minds with work and wisdom from around the globe, and the artist who builds beauty out of bits and pieces she finds online, and the writer whose stories use ideas and images crafted by people you've never even met. These people know that when you share your creative wealth, you can accomplish great things. They and millions of other people all around the planet are working together to build a richer, better, more vibrant culture using Creative Commons. To understand Creative Commons, you need to know a little bit about how copyright works. Did you know that when you create something, anything, from a photograph to a song, to a drawing, to a film, to a story, you automatically own an all rights reserved copyright to that creativity? It's true. Copyright protects your creativity against uses you don't consent to. But sometimes full copyright is too restrictive. What about when you want all those millions and millions of people out there to use your work without the hassle of coming to you for permission? What if you want your work to be freely shared, reused, and built upon by the rest of the world? Luckily, there's an answer. Creative Commons. We provide free copyright licenses you can use to tell people exactly which parts of your copyright you're happy to give to the public. It's easy. It only takes a minute and it's totally free. Just come to our website and answer a few quick questions like, will you allow commercial uses of your work? And will you allow your work to be modified? Based on your answers, we'll give you a license that clearly communicates what people can and can't do with your creativity. You don't give up your copyright, you refine it so it works better for you. Welcome to a new world where collaboration rules. It didn't even exist just a few years ago, but now there are millions and millions of songs, pictures, videos, and written works available to share, reuse, and remix, all for free. Want to work together? Then join the Commons, Creative Commons.
This content. So there are different requirements that you can attach to that Creative Commons license that you put into place. And it's a fun way to share your work, but feel like you have that bit of protection. So any questions or anything else on intellectual property before I turn it over to Jose? I feel like we're really on schedule, so that's great. Okay, so we will, I'll turn it over to you, Jose. I think you're going to touch on the certification checklist before we break for lunch at 12 o'clock. So we'll do lunch 12 to 1, and then we'll come back at 1. And Caroline, if you want to hang on at 12 o'clock just for us to talk about, or I can call you, or we'll figure that out after. Are you ready to go, Jose?
Yes.
Super.
I think I'm ready. Any questions for Tammy before you?
Oh, I see your number, Caroline. I will call you at 12 o'clock.
All right, so
Thanks.
I will share my screen. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
So we have half an hour until we break for lunch. So I'm just gonna cover a few slides on. Here we go. This is my presentation. Oops. Let's go here, slideshow. Okay, here we go. So my name is Jose Diaz. This is my email address. There is a number 1 at the end of my last name, so it is a very common name. So if you are going to send me an email, make sure that you add a 1 after the letter Z. So that's Jose_Diaz, the number 1 at fitnyc.edu. And I'm located in B 5008, 508-1. It's a little tricky because there is another B508 that's next door, but that's a classroom. So if you're looking for me, make sure there's a -1, like my email. So it makes sense, I guess. And I was put in the right room, Tammy. I'm next to the escalators on the 5th floor. And so if you're looking for me or Antonia, we're located in the same office. So that's B508-1. Can someone volunteer to be my eyes in the chat room? Anybody? Because it's hard for me to switch between presentation mode and if you are volunteering, if you could turn on your mic and tell me who you are.
Hi, Jose. It's Anne Marie. I can monitor the chat.
Awesome, Anne-Marie, you're the best. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
checking the chat too, Jose.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Antonia. So
You're
if anything is, if I'm not able to share my screen, please let me know because it's easier for me to switch. It's easier for me to hear your voices and to switch between the presentation and the chat. So I have to say, I feel like the luckiest person at FIT. I work with the 2 best colleagues in the world. So that's Antonia and Tammy. This is us way before the pandemic hit. So this is a little, when I think maybe the first year I started, I think it was around 2017 or 2018. So that's the 3 of us. Tammy did mention we also have a 4th person in our team, which is Lynn, and we also have Margaret, who also helps out with us. So we're basically a very small team. So that's who we are.
Thanks, Jose. That was pre-pandemic.
I know, I can't believe it. Look at that. Oh my gosh. I would love to share my slides with you all. Now, the slides, the way I created them, is not like the normal regular slides where my slides are text heavy. And I will warn you ahead because there's a reason why I made them this way, is because I will share these slides with you, make them a resource to you if you ever need to go back, if you forget something, because today we will cover so much material. I mean, by now I can barely remember, the last 20, the first 20 minutes, because there's so much we're going to cover today. So I do recommend, let me put that link in the chat room so that you can have access to my slides. So I'll put that in here in the chat room.
Everyone's presentation slides will also be in Blackboard, so you can find them there too.
Perfect. Thank you, Antonia. This link will take you to my slides, which and then, I see people are joining, which is great. But what you can do here is you can simply go to the top left corner, click File, make a copy, and make them your own. They will be under your Google Drive. You have access to them anytime you log in with your FIT email address. Go into, you can go from your Gmail, click on the 9 little dots at the top right. You go to Google Drive, and you'll see either in here you will see my slides. So that's how you can get access to them. But I recommend making your own copy so they belong to you. If you need help with making copies or making these slides your own, just let me know, or Antonia, one of us will help you. But simply click on File, make a copy, entire presentation, And you can even rename it if it makes more sense to you to rename it. You can do that by simply clicking on the top and changing the title. All right. So that was the first thing that I had, is for you to gain access to my slides. The second thing I also want to mention is jump in if you have a comment or sorry, question. Jump in, turn on the mic. I don't want to be the only person speaking. I just don't like to be the only one speaking. So just jump in if you have a question, and it'll be easier if you turn on your mic and ask, because then having to switch between the presentation, the chat, just makes it harder to do it that way. So with everything, you have learning objectives. And for today, the main objective for today is just to become familiar with the OSCAR rubric. So this is the standard rubric from SUNY, right, State University of New York, with the guidelines that we follow. And we abide to these guidelines very strictly. And this is why we want to sit down with you all today and go over these guidelines, so that as you're building your course, you will follow these guidelines, and hopefully you won't have to rebuild or redo things. So I'm trying to save you time by going over this rubric with you, because when you and I do meet 3 weeks before, at least 3 weeks, that you have the correct material and you don't have to do more work and have to redo things. So that's really what I'm trying to do today, just to show you what the rubric is about, and why are things done that way, so that when students take your course, it just makes it much easier for you as well as your students to take an online course. It makes it much easier. Along the way, as we're going through the SUNY rubric, there are other things that I want you to take away, and these are what's listed here are some of the most important things that I want you to take into consideration. Is we will cover how to design your course for the online environment, and we'll talk about different strategies. We're going to talk about different pedagogical strategies like backward design, universal design, like Jeffrey mentioned earlier, and those things we will cover. The other thing I find very important for an online student is to have a course calendar. A course calendar will not only help your students. Tammy made an excellent point by saying that a lot of students who take online classes are either parents or working full time. So everything revolves around a calendar or a schedule. And so if you provide a calendar for your students ahead of time, they can easily plan around their schedule. And that's really helpful for your students. Now, for you as a professor, as an instructor teaching an online course, this provides a guideline for you or a map that will help you not only design your course 17 weeks, whatever, 15 to 17 weeks ahead, and create that pathway and become more organized. So as you're developing your course, as you're building the course and you're seeing this roadmap that you built for yourself, it's not like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do for week 15. Oh, what am I going to come up with week 16? You already all have this planned ahead of time, and it helps you to think what's coming up, and just helps you organize your material and also your schedule to build your course. Because remember, you do have to have 4 weeks of content ready for when you and I meet to get your course certified. So that gives you a buffer of at least having 4 weeks of content. And then having this course calendar will help you plan your schedule as to, okay, well, I have 4 weeks done. What do I have to do for week 5, 6, 7, and so forth? Having that course calendar will help you navigate through the development of this course. We're also going to talk about what tools are best for you. Jeffrey touched a little bit, and Tammy also, about technology. I always say the same thing. I always say the purposeful use of technology, right? Not just because, hey, this is a cool new toy, or this is the coolest new thing that people are using and I want to use it too. It always goes back to your learning objectives. If it's not, if the tool is not allowing you to meet those learning objectives, then that tools probably should not belong in your suitcase, like Jeffrey mentioned. The analogy of carrying extra baggage. If you're going to the airport and there's clothes hanging out of your suitcase because you're overpacked, then something is wrong. So again, it's a purposeful use of technology, not only for video, but we also will talk about discussion. I think I heard, I hear either a question or a statement out there. Anybody?
It was Tammy. She just said she's stepping away for a few minutes.
Oh, thank you, Anne-Marie. Perfect.
Sure.
All right, so we can party now. Tammy's gone.
Yes.
I'm just kidding. A virtual, we'll do a virtual party. And lastly, student assessments. That's a big topic. I love to talk about. I can easily take up the whole time to talk about student assessments, but I will have to control myself and keep it to a minimum. But we will talk about student assessments. We'll talk about formative and summative assessments once we come back from the lunch break. And a quick tip, it's a lot to cover, and I recommend take notes because there's some things that you can easily forget because, again, Tammy, Jeffrey, and myself already have covered. I mean, we already covered a lot so far. Also, keep in mind that this will be recorded, so you can always go back and watch the video later. So you can pause and rewind and slow down or speed it up. So that will be available to you, like Antonia mentioned. And so the overall outline of what we will cover basically aligns with what the rubric is, how the rubric is set up. So I'm strategically aligning today's presentation with the rubric. And so if you do not have access to the master rubric, I will copy this link and post it in the chat so that you can all have access to it. So let me do that real quick. Here we go. Copy the link and let's post this link into the chat room. Okay, so now you will have maybe 3 tabs or 4 tabs open. I don't know how many. The one with the where we're all in the presentation room. Then I gave you the link to the presentation. And now this other new tab, this is going to take you to the certification checklist. And what you can do from here is, and I can see everybody's joining, which is wonderful. You can do the same thing like we did before, right? You can go here, click on File. You're going to make a copy of this, and you can rename it. And I strongly suggest that you make a copy of this document, because this is the document that you and I are going to use to certify your course.
Jose,
And
can
yes,
I interrupt? I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say, for the people who aren't here and you're going to watch the video later, the link to this is also in the Blackboard shell. It's in the course information folder, and inside of that folder is another folder, online learning guidelines and requirements. So this is also, you can find that there. So just wanted to say it for the people who will be watching the video later.
Perfect. Thank you, Antonia. And so that's another resource, right, for you to go back and look at the video if you want to use that to refresh your memory. Pamela is asking, is this updated in any way? Is it the same one that we copied during the first session? Antonia, right? This is going to be a new one.
This has been updated. So if you, it's okay if you started with the first one, but to finish your certification, please use this one. It's not going to be updated again this year. So this should be the final copy.
Okay, so we before we move on to the next slide, I just want to make sure that was everyone able to open the certification checklist? Anybody have any problems or issues opening it or making a copy of it?
All
If everyone
good.
can,
All good.
all good?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you, Anne-Marie. So again, we're all here to help. Antonia, myself, and Tammy. If you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to us. For me, I prefer email, but you can even call me too to my office number with any questions regarding any of these things. Here we go. So I just wanted to open up the room real quick since we have 15 minutes before we break. Has anyone taken an online course before, either as a student or as a teacher and maybe in another institution? Anybody can turn on their microphone and maybe speak to their experience taking an online course or teaching an online course?
Several people have responded yes.
Okay.
I personally have not.
Oh, you haven't, Anne?
I can start out. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Perfect.
So I actually taught online at Berkeley College for initially when they first started online. I saw it as an opportunity. You know, why not? No, not even thinking, 10 years later there'd be a pandemic. But I find that taking online courses are a good reminder as to language and instructions, to be reminded of that, things can be approached in so many different ways and minds think so differently. It's such a time-consuming process to put, to get courses live that I think, again, other sets of eyes coming and going are really good because things that you write make sense to you, but then you have somebody else read it and they interpret things completely different. And that's aside from, everybody now skimming over reading and speed reading constantly. This is even going back, 10 years ago when people took the time to read even more so than now. So, yeah, I guess it's so time consuming, but oftentimes checking in with people to see, and I know that's where the checklist and you come in, Jose, but yeah, and even updating from semester to semester, going through that checklist again, whatever, looking at hyperlinks. It's really, it's a labor of love. This is your baby. Is what I've found. And it's a baby that needs tending to, like every semester. And of course, updating things before students find the mistakes is a good thing because then they sort of lose, I guess, a little bit of trust in the system.
Right.
If that's helpful.
I couldn't say it any better. This is Pamela, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I recognize it. I couldn't say it any better, Pamela. You hit the nail on the head. I think it's a lot of front-loading work. It hits you hard in the beginning, the front, the beginning, and then you feel like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And then you're like, then I have to, I get faculty come into my office. Oh my gosh, Jose, I didn't realize so much work. But I always got to comfort and say, well, you have done a lot of the work up, the front upload, front loading a lot of the work in the beginning. A lot of this work you will copy over to the next semester. I mean, not to say that there won't be any tinkering. There will be, right? There's always room for improvement, right? So think of it that way. It is a daunting task at first when you see, oh, well, I have to do this, I got to do that. Oh my gosh, where am I going to find time? And at the same time, you're learning how to use new tools. And then at the same time, you're also in a new environment because your mindset has to change. If you're a face-to-face teacher your whole career, and now you're moving into this new environment, it's like running into a wall. You realize, oh my goodness, a lot of the stuff or some of the things that I did in face-to-face doesn't carry over to online, but some of it does, and that's why today's talk I want to talk about um, converting what worked well for you in your face-to-face, and how can you bring that over. You know, don't say, well, I'm going online, and don't believe that, oh, I won't be able to bring this over. This is why we're here, Jeffrey, myself, Antonia, and Tammy, to talk with you to see what is that vision that you have for your course and help you create that vision in an online environment. That's a great insight, Pamela. Thank you for that. So it is a lot of work. Anybody else want to say something before we have 9 minutes?
Jose, sorry, can you see the chat now, or do you want me to? There was some chat about the checklist and the updated version. I think Sharon was concerned she didn't see the shared file in the Google Drive, and Tamara's back and said that the checklist is updated. The one that you shared today is updated, so that should be the one
Yes.
that we'll follow, correct?
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Yes, so the link that I provided is the updated rubric, the SUNY Oscar rubric. That is the most up-to-date, and this is what we're going to be using for your certification. So that's the 52-point checklist that Tammy mentioned.
And there were also, so Sharon's confirming that it's also, she sees that it's available in Blackboard in the content area of the Blackboard course shell. So we can find it there, or we can just click on your link and copy it as you suggested.
Correct. Either link should point you to the right direction. We updated that link in the course, and so it's the same link that I provided in the chat room. So either way, that's also something that we like to do in your online course, is provide different ways to get to the same place. So that's something that you might, we'll cover later on, being redundant and creating multiple ways for students to gain access to the same material. Is that it, Anne-Marie? Anybody else want to talk?
I did want to say something. I have to say that teaching an online course always seemed very scary to me in a way, until the pandemic hit and we started teaching remote courses, and I was teaching 3 courses, you know, remotely per semester, and I really feel like I got the hang of a lot of aspects. Now I realize that there's certainly a difference between synchronous and asynchronous teaching, but I think a lot of the things that I learned teaching remotely could carry over, not everything, but a lot can be carried over to a fully asynchronous course.
Well, Anne-Marie, that's perfect. It's like it's like I picked the right person, because it's a perfect segue to what is online learning, right? So what are the differences? And you mentioned remote teaching, and I really want to tackle this first, because there's still a lot of confusion between what is online learning, what is remote teaching, and what is face-to-face. So just like Anne-Marie mentioned, we all had to jump on remote teaching during the pandemic, right? And some of us were prepared, some of us were not prepared. And it was a big challenge. I mean, many people who only taught face-to-face had a tough time adapting to remote teaching. And remote teaching is, all 3 are very different, 3 different, their own different animals. They're all completely different, but there are similarities between. Remote teaching is what we did during the pandemic, and remote teaching basically is what we're doing today. We're meeting at the same time, we're all together, but we're virtually meeting, right? So similar to face-to-face, which is synchronous, we're all meeting at one place at one time together, and that's called synchronous teaching. Now, the difference between remote teaching and face-to-face is that in a face-to-face classroom, you have your students in front of you physically in the classroom, a brick and mortar building, right? We're all in a building, and the students are coming into class. You're there, there's a blackboard behind you, and they come in, hopefully on time, and you teach to them in front of you. And then, you know, this is where I see that teachers have that superhero skills. This is where you are able to read body language, see their faces, and adapt to if a student is yawning or they're excited, and then you use your superhero strengths, and you're a teacher. You are a superhero. Remote teaching is similar to that, but sometimes webcams are not on and you cannot read the students, and you have to either say, well, I need your webcams to be turned on. And it's very challenging because if you're presenting like I'm presenting right now, it's hard sometimes to do both, present and also look at your students and get that, read your students that way. Online learning is completely different than those two other options. Online learning is more of self-paced. Students do not have to be at a certain place at a certain time. This is asynchronous teaching. A lot of it falls on the students to do the work and have a course calendar, have a plan, strategize, time management skills. They have to know, they have to be more mature to know that, hey, these things are due. I have to go, I gotta be self-motivated to go into the course, open up the video lecture, watch the video, and then do whatever is required of me. And then I don't have the luxury of talking to the professor face to face. And so this is where the difference is between the three, right? So online learning I feel that it requires more maturity from your students. They have to be able to have time management skills, soft skills. And this is why sometimes there are students that take online classes for the wrong, with the wrong impression that's going to be easier than to take a face-to-face class because they don't have to show up to a physical classroom. And they have that they interpret it differently, and they've probably never taken an online class before. So you might encounter students like that who are taking an online class for the first time, and they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. And so we do have material on our website for students, and to instruct them and teach them, educate them what is an online class. But just a heads up, I just want you all to know the difference between what is online learning, what is remote teaching, and what is face-to-face. We have about 2 minutes before we break into lunch. Does anybody have any questions before we break out for lunch?
Jose, can you hear
Yes.
me? This is Liddy Code in science and math. I find the online courses fill up quickly, the number of students.
Mm-hmm.
My course is full, but then
right.
And it teaches like physical science. Well, I know that's not one of the things they go to FIT for. So, I'm not sure why they're taking it. But if you look at the enrollment in the other sections, it's only a couple students. So they think the online course maybe is easier or whatever. Are the students advised in any way before they register about this? Do they know what they're getting into?
Oh, what they're getting themselves into. So we do offer information on our website, best practices for students. We do offer resources for them to, and then I think Tammy, jump in please if you have any other.
Yeah, there's a little blurb. There's a little blurb in the registration by each course what an online course is, and a link to online and what you should do, that it's not for everybody, that you need to be self-motivated, comfortable reading and writing. The problem is that blurb is not always seen by students. There are other ways to register other than read it in the course listings about the course. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that. I would highly recommend those resources Jose mentioned on the homepage of Blackboard. It's a student orientation. It's a list of tips on how to succeed in online courses, and there's a Blackboard orientation as well. Some professors like giving quizzes on those orientations. So they will assign them as part of an icebreaker, give a short quiz, have you read tips for success in online learning. And so that's been a really great idea. I think if you really want to make sure students read those tips or do the Blackboard orientation, you can look through those resources and see what you might feel comfortable assigning to your students. But I think that's a nice way to do it. Yeah, Caroline, you can also add it to your syllabus. I know a lot of faculty are reluctant to make their syllabus much longer than it is, but I think it's a 1 to 2 pager, our list on best practices. So yeah, feel free to use those if you want to use those.
But that's after the course or the semester starts a little bit, isn't it? I mean, like right now they're registering.
Yes, it's after registration. I mean, they can we certainly point them to our website in the registration catalog, but you're right. Some of them will sign up not knowing. Now, I should have emphasized this earlier. I don't know if I did. It's something you should all be aware of. All online courses, according to the contract, open 1 week before the semester starts. So all of you will be called on to open your online courses a week early with just your course information and the basics of your course. You're not teaching during that period. You're just posting that information. That was put into place based on research that students do better in online courses when they are prepared and they know what to expect in the online course, when they know what materials are required and how the course will go. So you are welcome to post an initial announcement or video if there's anything you would like them to know about what they're getting into. And they will have time to drop the course, you know, during that first week before the course starts if they don't want to. But you're right, Joseph. I mean, there's other ways probably that we could reach out to students to, you know, some faculty have suggested that we should pre-qualify students for signing up for an online course, that they should take an orientation and a test and then be permitted to sign up for an online course. But I've discussed that with several people, and there's really no way for us to track that without having a huge team for, you know, tracking which students have completed that orientation.
Can I just
Brian?
add something really quick, Tammy? So if you wanted to, what you could do is at the beginning of your course, also encourage your students to use the Academic Skills Tutoring Center, because they have support for students in using Blackboard, in navigating not just the you know, your Blackboard course, but all of the courses that they're taking, because we all use Blackboard in different ways, and there can be specific items that they need to you know, be aware of in your course that their other professors aren't using. So it can become confusing pretty easily. So what they have at the Academic Skills Tutoring Center is somebody to work with to go through all of the different courses and sort of figure it all out and be thinking about when are the deadlines. And they'll also help them maintain, like establish and maintain a kind of calendar around the different due dates that have been established for the courses that they're in. So there are other opportunities for support for students. You obviously can't necessarily force them to do this, but it's there, and you can encourage them to reach out.
That's a great point, Brian. Thank you. We should probably add that to our tips for success in online courses, that they are available and they do online, right?
Yes, and I mean, even students could come to the Writing and Speaking Studio and say, I want to have a planning session where they may look at all of the assignments that are due in your course over the course of the semester. You know, those may be more focused on either writing or on presentations in our area. But at the Academic Skills Tutoring Center, they have this whole mini workshop that's tailored to students around organizing their digital life, which can help them plan and think about how they're going to accomplish all the tasks that are being thrown at them. And, you know, the reality is that there are, you know, most of our students are taking anywhere from 6 to 8 different kinds of courses throughout the semester, and they're being asked to use different platforms and different different kinds of technology in order to accomplish the coursework. So something like that can be really helpful for them to kind of just get it set in their heads where they need to be for your course versus somebody else's.
For sure. That's a great point. Jose, should we stop there? I don't know if you were midpoint with that.
That was right. That was the way I wanted to end. Thank you, Brian, for jumping in there. Yeah, they're a great ally to FIT is a great resource, the Reading and Writing Studio.
Yeah.
But Tammy, yeah, we can break if
yeah, I
if
just want to
you're-
give everyone their full hour to eat and
Yeah,
do whatever.
yeah, and we'll be back at 1.
Yeah, so we'll be back at 1. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Should I stop the recording here, Antonia?
Oh yeah, you probably
Yeah,
should,
that'd
right?
be a good idea.